Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is, The Shadows Are Driving Me Crazy, and I Think I Found a Solution, by Mr. Pagan 665. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like, and if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street, and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. I moved recently to an apartment just a bit outside the capital city of Sofia. The place was rather affordable and a decent enough distance from the nearby grocery shops, bus and train stations. My flat was in the highest floor, and the view of the city was breathtaking. I could see the sun set over the towering scrapers before vanishing behind the tall dark silhouette of Vitosha Mountain. The air was fresh at night, far away from the carbon-filled toxins of the asphalt city. Yet, there was a sinister part to all these, for I would not be writing this. I've been driven lately into a despair of outer madness, as things in this apartment do not tend to be what they seem. I think it all began a month after I moved in, even though now in insight, I tend to think that perhaps it was earlier. But a month seems proper, as the most evident presence of the upcoming terrors was noticed. I was sitting in my living room and indulging my self-made meal when I heard a sudden thump coming from behind me. I quickly turned around, only to see that the portrait I had hung onto the wall had suddenly dropped to the ground. Thinking perhaps a breeze coming from the open window was the reason, I quickly closed it, while then heading back to where the portrait was and attempting to hang it. To my surprise, even the nail that was pierced into the wall seemed to have fallen, as it was missing from its spot. With a sigh, and not a single strength to bother with it now, I placed the portrait onto a nearby stool before continuing my dinner. As the night progressed, my television casted light into my small flat, causing the shadows to be elongated and stretched eerily. Something that I never fully noticed up until around 1 a.m., when a sudden glass-shattering sound caused me to jump out of my seat as I felt my heart begin to pound. Next to me was situated a small table where I placed my dining plate. The ceramic in question, however, was on the floor scattered into pieces. While I remained baffled at the ongoing circumstances, what I also saw made me eerily shiver, as I thought I noticed the overcasted shadow over the table to withdraw an inch back. I stared at the shadow like a madman, or like a child waiting for something to happen. I swallowed, as nothing seemed to occur, and then my eyes focused once more to the broken plate below my feet. With a sigh once more, I rushed to the nearby light switch and let the white piercing light illuminate the dark corners of the room. The light bulb flickered as it finally stabilized, and its white and cold rays loomed over the objects, causing their dark counterparts to shrink. I cleaned up the broken plate and contemplated whether or not I should simply go to sleep, as the night seemed to be heavily playing weird tricks on me. With that, I went to sleep that night, but what followed next was beyond my expectations. Weird dreams had followed that evening, dreams in which I was drowning in gulf of darkness. Specters of weird inhuman shapes danced around me, and a sensation of utter dread had built up. I could feel my body trembling, as if I was in a weird state between dream and reality. This endless vortex of both shapes and sounds became more clear, as I could finally see the shape of my room being formed before me. Faint lights came from the side window, illuminating parts of the room, and there in my sleepy haze, I could see the shadows once more, moving in a sinister way. Fear took over, as if I did not know whether this was a dream or reality. The shapes came closer. A tight sensation was felt on my neck, a cold grasp, something unnatural. I think I snapped out of my paralysis as I noticed my hand was at the nearby light stand. The orange glow illuminated the room, and I was in a clear state of paranoia. I was sweaty, and my clock showed 4 a.m. I wasn't feeling sleepy no more. I think I got up that time and began preparing for a much earlier breakfast. Day eventually came, and the rooms and narrow corridors were filled with natural light, but yet an eerie sensation lurked, as if the shadows were simply gone to sleep and waited for the night in order to rise from their slumber and engulfing everything into their tight and darkened grasp. At work, I began thinking about last night's events. The thoughts of me being tired and whether or not the paralysis was just an effect of the late night snack were beginning to soothe me for a brief moment. But I could swear that with the corner of my eyes, I could see things move, shapes and figures. As I left work, the sun was setting once more over the city, causing the shadows of the nearby street poles and signs to elongate and stretch. A howling autumn wind had picked up, causing me to quiver as I pulled up my jacket, as if sheltering myself from the upcoming cold. I waited at the bus stop, and night soon befell upon us. It was 6 p.m., and the bus was running late today. There were 2 people next to me, of which one of them seemed visibly confused, as his gaze was fixated at the streetlight pole situated next to the station. The man stared at the ground for at least half an hour before jumping in terror and screaming. The woman next to him, as well as I, were equally terrified as we saw him get up and shake his eyes. He then apologized and said that he thought that something had moved. Distressed as I was, I felt obligated to offer some form of help, in which the man kindly nodded me that it was fine, and he was simply being a little stressed lately. The whole encounter was uncannily strange, as a strange tension filled the air. The man was often seen shaking, and his eyes were wide, as if seeing something. I traced his gaze, and he would stare in the empty dark alleyway opposite of us. The empty street along with the dark shadows that came from further back from the alley was making me equally uncomfortable. The bus finally arrived, and we rushed inside. There, the fluorescent lights immediately washed the darkness that covered us, as if cleansing us from whatever was outside. The night that followed was no uneventful, and I dare say it was the scariest of them all, for what I saw was beyond anything that I would ever imagine. I was sitting on my bed, resting my back onto the wall, and began reading one of my books that I had been neglecting for a while now. The abat jower situated next to me casted its warm orange glow, creating shadows of the nearby objects onto the white wall opposite of me. There, with the corner of my eye, I noticed something moving. My eyes looked upwards, and I saw the shadow casted from my chair onto the white wall. A slight sensation of unease washed over me, as the shadow had an uncanny resemblance of a humanoid figure wearing some form of a shroud. I chuckled awkwardly at the thought and decided to get up and move the chair so it would twist the shadow and disturb it. As I moved the chair, however, the figure remained. I swallowed as I felt my hair being raised as a shiver was being sent down my spine. I took a step back, and my eyes were fixated by the figure, and I could swear I saw it move right where the blank white of the wall was present. My eyes were following the shadow as it made its way to the center of the wall, as if detaching itself from the object it was once part of. But the strangest part was that my shadow began to crawl upwards, stretching, becoming bigger and wider. I panicked. I began looking around, and there they were, the shadows, I mumbled. As I tried to walk towards the light switch, the shadows were growing, merging into one single entity at the center of every wall. I could hear a faint distorted sound emitting from it, similar to the ones I had heard in my dreams. My body was filled with adrenaline, and at that moment, I rushed towards the light switch, but I felt a resistance. I felt a cold grasp onto my body, as if someone was holding me back. I don't know how I managed to escape that grasp, but I did. And I pressed the light switch, causing the room to be instantly illuminated. The shadows were instantly vanished, and what was left in their place was the white space. Needless to say, I didn't sleep that night with the lights off, for I feared they would come again, and this time I would not be able to escape their grasp. However, the next day, what had come to my attention was deeply disturbing. I was shopping at my local hardware store for more lamps and other sources of light when I stumbled at an open television where the news was being broadcasted. Apparently, the man from that bus stop was found dead in his apartment earlier this morning by his daughter. The news didn't cover much more details about his passing, besides the fact that it could have been a heart attack. This was purely based on the assumption that the man was found lifeless in his bed, without any wounds nor signs of external trauma. I clenched the light bulbs and other products in my hands, and I rushed to the counter where I paid for everything, and left the scene as if being chased by some unknown entity. Abajou Christmas lights and flashlights were all installed in my room, as well as the rest of the house. I spared not a single inch of darkness, for the fear of the stalking shadows was far greater. Night soon fell, and I was in a state of panic, but felt confident that the sources of light would keep me safe. Up until a week or so, when a storm broke out and caused a massive blackout near the region. Fear soon took over, as I knew what came with the darkness. Thankfully, I had a lot of flashlights, and I managed to maintain a nice circle of light to keep the shadows away. But they still came, and this time hungrier than ever. I saw their dark tentacles spiraling out of the spots of light, as if avoiding it, trying to reach me. But I fought back, for I moved the lights all around, keeping them at bay. I saw one of the shapes quickly stretching from the opposite wall and gliding across the ceiling before trying to reach the shadow that I casted behind me. But I used another flashlight to keep them away, and it worked. I kept on going like this for hours and hours, and I felt fatigue taking the best of me. I haven't eaten for God knows how long, and I felt tired as the night progressed, and I was sleepless. But a miracle had occurred, and soon after the power went back on, and the white lights filled the room once more. I won that night, but at what price? With every passing day, my sanity is depleting. I stopped working. I stockpiled a bunch of canned food to keep me sustained for a couple of months. I removed everything from my room, leaving only the mattress and my laptop. The walls were painted white, so they can absorb the light better. The windows were wide open, bringing in sunlight. I stopped wearing clothes, for it would create weird shadows. Time went by, and as of writing this, things haven't been going on very well. I feel the shadows are taking over, despite my efforts. And I am stuck in this white cube of white walls and bright fluorescent lights. The shadows killed that man. The shadows took him, and they are coming for me tonight. The electrical company turned off my source of survival, as I haven't paid them for 2 months straight. The bill is over 400 euros, an amount I cannot pay. I chuckled at the defeat as I see the sun setting one last time from my windows. Its broad strokes of violent crimson and bright orchid yellow fill the sky, and white specters of stars are beginning to take its place. I am posting this as a last note, for I will either die by the shadows, or I will jump from the window. I do not know yet. Nevertheless, I am dying tonight, for I have no strength left in me. I doubt I would even manage to write this if it wasn't for the various opioids I had taken previously. A warning then, friends. If you see the shadows move, leave. Or, in fact, I don't know what you should do. Goodbye.